everybody, and welcome to a very exciting and special episode of Y'all We Read It. My name's Laura. I'm one of the hosts,
My name is Meggie, and I'm the other host.
and this is very exciting for us because what we're doing today is we are reading the second prequel in the Maze Runner series. And much like the prequel we did last week, we have a very special guest joining us today. We have Arthur Howell, host of Cents Critic, where Meggie and I have guested before. So Arthur has come into our domain to read this book with us and really dissect it. Arthur, welcome.
Hello, everybody. Yes, I'm Arthur Howell from Cents Critic, and I'm glad to be here. Very, very exciting. Thank you for having me on. And we've already been podcasting in the past because
Yeah.
I had two hosts here on my show to talk about The Midnight Library by Matt Haig, and then they came back to discuss You by Karen Kepner, specifically the book, the first book in the series, not
Mhm.
the Netflix
Mhm.
show, the book. So it was fun
Pretty
discussion.
exciting. Arthur and I have already talked about the trailer for You, part one. And Arthur, I don't know if you know this, but part one comes out on my birthday on
Really?
Netflix.
Yeah.
Ooh.
It's the greatest gift Netflix could have gotten for Meggie this year.
Yeah, that's
I did it.
um,
exciting.
Yeah.
um, Arthur, so I know you've read some of the Maze Runner books previously, and you obviously read this one for this podcast, but what is your experience with Maze Runner?
Well, Maze Runner was it was a young adult dystopian book series that I was diving into back when it was a few years ago. Back when I was exploring other books like the Hunger Games, Legend by Marie Lu, Divergent, all of those. And then I was diving into this as well, and it was I found it to be I feel like pretty fun, even though I feel like looking back, the series is kind of like so it's like it's definitely a very YA book series, very dystopian, very
Yeah. Oh,
tropey.
Yeah.
If you really
100%.
want to break it down, and sometimes I'm just like, certain tropes they just really bug me, like the way that Thomas gets treated, and it's like you're not giving him any
Yeah.
information, and the way the plot unfolds,
Yeah, Maggie and I say James Dashner suffers from author who got a movie deal and then just starts writing just insane action plot points, which is what we saw in The Death Cure and especially The Kill Order. A little less in this book, but I would argue there's still a lot of just like unnecessary, like flary action scenes that go through.
Yeah, this definitely was a wrap up to the whole series. And in that sense, there were a lot of plot points moving in. Like, we got obviously a lot of Maze Runner, the initial backstory, and then a
Yeah,
bit of Scorch Trials, not much of Death Cure, but I think they would expand on things that they had written in so many subplots. So it
yeah,
was very interesting. A lot of
yeah.
information.
Yeah, my like initial like summary of it is like this book answered a lot of questions but also created like a lot more that I did not have after reading the initial trilogy. I was like, okay, kind of cool. I get we're getting an explanation for like this thing, but now I
Mhm.
have a question about this, which is a new thing for me to think about. So I think in James Dashner's efforts to kind of like close his loop a little bit, he ended up just kind of creating like a second lap around the circle, and it's like, okay,
Mhm.
I've got more things that I'm thinking about and questions like, why the fuck did Lizzie have to be a character, and like what was that purpose and all of that. So
I was
I'm
kind of
excited to talk about this with y'all
I was
because I've got
intrigued by that.
thoughts.
I was intrigued by that actually. I gotta say.
Yeah, I was intrigued by it too, but then it didn't really pay off at all in my opinion. Like it really just it was like introduced and I was like, that's cool. And then it was just kind of like, and we're still focusing on Talamus. And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Lizzie, let's get into the prologue because that
Let's
is
do it.
actually where we meet Lizzie. Lizzie and Newt, they are brother and sister, and we get a little slice of life moment where it's snowing outside, and it's kind of a happy day, but it's not really a happy day because the government is shows up at their house.
Oof, not good. Not good news. And what happens here is that the Wicked essentially comes because Lizzie is immune. They kill both of Lizzie and Newt's parents in this process. And they're like, He's not immune, but we got to take him with us anyway. He'll be a variable in the test." And then the prologue ends and we move to Thomas's point of view and Thomas being taken by Wicked.
Mhm.
Um, so it was an interesting way to introduce this book. I think my first big question is we later learned that obviously everybody gets a new name when they join Wicked.
Yeah.
So Lizzie becomes Sonia, who is a minor character in the other books, like really, really minor. But
Yeah.
Newt is still referred to as Newt in the prologue and then also after the prologue. So, like, did they not give him a name?
Oh, you're right.
I told you I got
Okay.
more questions after everything.
I okay, I'll admit I didn't catch on to that, which is strange. And now it's like, well, wait. So if he had the name Newt before he was captured, and then so that's a big plot hole
Who
right
the fuck
there.
would name their kid
Yeah.
Newt?
Why did
It was
Kevin
pretty
make an
pretty
exception
weird.
for him?
Yeah, I don't know. So something for all of us to keep thinking about because we're never gonna get an answer.
Well,
I know.
but there
We
is the
do
Maze
learn.
Cutter though. Keep that in mind. The Maze Cutter. That's the whole
Yeah, that's
sequel
true.
to the series, which takes
That's
place I
true.
think like 73 years after the events of the Death Cure.
I think it's on an island too, not a maze. We discussed
Oh.
it briefly last night, but
Yeah,
yes, Maze
yeah,
Cutter did just come out.
yeah.
We learn about Thomas's first name, which was he previously was Stefan, and he's fighting with a Randall Spilker, which maybe you remember from the last book we talked about. He was a part of the post Flare coalition.
Oh, he
Uh,
was? I did not catch on to that.
he was the one that was sharing the emails about them releasing the Flare.
Oh, good catch, Meg.
Thank you. Pretty crazy. And he's like, "Here, your name is Thomas, buddy." And he does not let
Yeah.
him forget.
Just
Yeah,
throwing
and
it in.
things they end up conditioning
No, no,
him
no.
to forget his old name, and through just torture tactics, which I thought was a little much for a 5-year-old to go through. I get it was supposed to be like edgy and cool, but I was like, James Dashner, you are torturing a literal child right now.
Was he
I
5?
don't think this is the kind of edgy we should be, striving for in the world of sci-fi dystopian YA.
Yeah, he was 5.
Wow, I thought he was like more like 7 or 8 or something like that. But that in any
When he's
case,
Because
taken, he's 5.
well, in any
yeah, because
case,
when they go into the maze, they're 16, and they say like when they're going in after like 10 years after getting there.
that's
So it's like he's
right.
like 5, 6 in this scene.
They're so
Yes.
young. They're
Yeah.
enduring all of this pain.
Right?
I know. Could you even imagine? You probably don't even know your colors by 5.
I mean,
You do.
yeah.
You
I
probably
Oh,
do.
maybe.
Yeah, and I will say, speaking of this whole like they are children doing this, I don't think James Dasher knows how to write children because they all like just seem like they're the same age throughout this. Like they're forming like these full thoughts and questions, and I'm like, I get they're like gifted children, but I don't think that they'd be like as deductive as they are in conversations with adults.
No, probably
Yeah.
not.
Yeah,
But Thomas's life is pretty boring here at Wicked. They take his blood
yeah,
every week, they check his brain, he takes some math and puzzle solving classes. And he's got history, which their history is just learning about the Flares Information Recovery Endeavor, which came before the Post Flares Coalition. He doesn't really like to pay attention in
yeah,
class, but the sum
yeah.
of it is he's been here for 2 years now, and he is very alone and bored.
Yeah, and time passes really weird in this book because each chapter has like the date and year at the top of it. But then it just kind of will suddenly just go forward a couple of years or a few months or a few weeks. And so sometimes it's kind of hard to really figure out where we are in this timeline without them explicitly stating it, in my opinion. I don't know how you guys
Mhm.
felt about that.
It was a lot of meetings with the Wicked people, which
Yeah.
I never knew what time it was unless they were like, it was years since that event passed.
Yeah, right. But they do have a meeting with Chancellor Anderson, and he tells them that big times are coming. And we also learned that Dr. Page, who is going to inevitably become Chancellor Ava Page from the original trilogy, she
Mhm.
tells Thomas that she's going to be working with him a lot more, and Thomas is excited because he actually really likes her. It is said that Ava Page is his favorite person at Wicked, so like that's nice.
Well,
Mhm.
it works like that, but then it's like, well, obviously we know how it's gonna turn out. So right away, I was like, nah, you're sus. I don't trust you. Also, I kept picturing her as
Yeah.
Patricia Clarkson from the movies.
As who?
Patricia Clarkson. She plays Paige in the Maze Runner movies. So I did
Oh, that's
picture
so
Yeah.
her
interesting.
that.
Nate was saying that Nate was our friend who was on our Kill Order episode, and he was like because like in the books, Ava Page is just like a character that's referenced. She's never seen, but she's like an actual full character in the movie. So now Maggie and I are like, we gotta watch these movies so we can
Yeah.
get like the full scoop, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So poor kid, he's like 7 at this point. They're saying it might be a year before he sees anyone else besides his new buddy, Dr. Page. And one day Dr. Page is after classes kind of wakes him up, and it's this new guy that's escorting him. So it's Dr. Page isn't there anymore.
It's
And they
Dr.
say
Levitt this time.
Dr. Levitt, we don't like this
I
guy.
honestly, by halfway through the book, I was like, oh, the doctor names don't really make sense unless it's Dr. Page. So there's just too many characters.
Well, Levitt's the street that I'm closest to where I live, so I remembered that.
Ooh, nice, nice.
And he is escorting him down the hall when he sees a kid with a bandage on his head, and the kid's name is Mino, and he's like, don't let them do it to you, it hurts, as like personnel is trying to escort him away. So whatever Thomas is about to get into is not good.
Yeah, and Thomas, he's a little nosy Nelly. He gets into his hospital room and it's like one of those like hospital curtains that separates two beds, and he rips open the other one and finds Newt, who also has the same. I pictured like a very comical cartoon bandage just like wrapped around their heads, and they're like, "Hey, kid, you stop that!" And then they sedate him essentially to get him ready for this.
Yeah.
Yes,
Oh man. So
so much for
he's
kids.
having some dreams. So
Yeah.
these poor kids, I mean, they are just not having a good time here. You know, it's
No.
like, I would rather maybe take my chances with the cranks outside, but I don't
Mhm.
know.
They're both tough.
Um,
Wicked, Cranks.
yeah,
Yeah, the lesser of two horrible futures, I guess.
it is kind of nice when he's getting his brain tampered with here, though, because he has some dreams about him and Teresa being friends, and
Mhm.
he wakes up to Dr. Page being like, since you were such a good boy, we have a little surprise for you soon, and you get to interact with a girl.
And he's like, "Yes."
So
I love
excited, so
it.
eager.
Yeah, right? So him and Teresa hang out, and I will say this exchange was kind of my favorite because Teresa's like in my opinion a lot cooler than Thomas. She's immediately like going to a doctor being like, "Did 7 kids actually die with those brain implants you gave us?"
We
Yeah,
go forward.
Teresa is she's a very astute like individual, because she's also
Yeah.
like, do you hear other kids laughing?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Teresa's just like, I like after reading this book, I was like, Teresa was always like a little like 4 steps ahead of Thomas, and I think that's what made her way more smart than him because Thomas was like, it took him until like the way later in the book that he was like, wait a minute, I think Wicked isn't gonna stop doing these tests, and it's like, yeah, Thomas,
But yeah,
what did
obviously.
you think?
Even in the whole series, Teresa was the one who was always like knowing everything, because she was like the one who was knowing about Wicked and secretly working behind everyone's backs and being like, "Oh, I know all the info."
Yeah.
Oh man, okay, wait, Arthur, so you've read these books. Are you a team Teresa or a team Brenda? I'm so curious.
Uh, I I feel like I lean a little more strongly towards Teresa, admittedly. Even though,
Okay,
eh,
okay.
even though I feel like there were times when I was maybe rooting a bit more for Brenda, but I feel like I was just and at the end of the day always leaning a bit more towards Teresa. Even though there were some moments where I know I felt hurt, when she was betraying her friends, and it's just like, oh, it's painful that you did
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
lot of reason to like Teresa. One of them she brings up here, which is that she's ridden in a flat trans. Thomas hasn't done that yet, but Teresa's really cool. We're never gonna ride in a flat trans. And she also indicates that she was Dee Dee from the last
Yeah.
book.
Yeah, which we know is confirmed at the end of the last book in the second prologue or epilogue that Meggie and I didn't actually read.
Nope.
Oops.
Oops.
Um,
She's thinking that there's this trigger switch in her brain that she keeps trying to pull, and she's like trying to convince. It's like her and Thomas are that Spider-Man meme pointing at each other because Thomas thinks he's getting headaches because of the flare, and she's like, "Do I sound insane right now? I think there's a switch in my head." And he's like, "You know what? No, you don't. I will also like meditate and explore my brain for this switch." Um, before the next day, which it seems like there's something's going down because Dr. Levitt wakes up and he's like, "It's time to show you guys something."
yeah, and this is where he takes them to where the maze is will inevitably go, and he's like, "You two are gonna help us build this maze." And I get this was supposed to be like a maze origin story, but my issue became like, okay, I get we're trying to like, build a containment zone for like people to test their brain patterns, but why does it have to be a maze specifically? Like, was there like a board meeting where they were like, well, what if we just like put them on an island, or what if we just put them in like a room with windows in it and no exits or something? Like, why did it specifically have to be a maze is my big question.
It just feels so
Yeah.
mysterious like that, like with because the way
Yeah,
Wiccan works is
I
like,
guess
oh, we got
so.
all these variables and we need to use them,
Mhm.
to work the experiment and test them out, see which one helps us get closer and closer to the solution of, creating a
Mhm.
cure for the flare. So I feel like that's always like so, oh, like if they're doing anything, it's because, oh, it's a variable, blah 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 blah.
Exactly, yeah. I think that was a cop out way for us to be like, well, we can do anything because it's a variable. But I would also argue that they probably should have like intermixed these groups so it wasn't just like all boys here, all girls. Because I feel like they would have gotten even more like
More
variables
variables.
if they got some hormones involved, cross sectional.
Oh my gosh, you're right. Like, introduce
Right?
them at the time, like, puberty starts.
Oh my god,
I'm
could you
very
imagine?
curious.
You separate them for like ever so they hardly see a girl or a boy their age, and then you're like, great, now that you're a teenager, here's a world where you meet another person that you might be interested in. Now that's a book I'd read.
Yes,
I feel
that would
like
be
there's
very
way too much
intriguing.
trust in these kids.
Very intriguing, but even then, it's like, but see, now here's the thing, because I also wonder, like, where's like the queerness happening? Because even if it's just a boys group or a girl group, like, where is like
There's got to
any
be
queer
some. Megan and I
relations
talked about this
happening?
in depth.
That
Yeah.
is so funny because I was literally thinking that when I finished this one of like when Teresa goes up in the maze and they're like, "I call dibs on the girl." I'm sorry, and maybe it's just because I'm like you would think like they're 16. I feel like something would happen in one of the groups.
Something.
I,
Yeah.
I definitely
Right?
think that's on James Dashner not to address because I really think that at least
Yeah.
this or like more.
Something
I know.
somewhere.
Now it really makes me intrigued to see like
Yeah,
the maze cutter, because I feel like what if now that that one came out in like the actual like 2020s, like maybe he did be like, and now there's gay characters here.
yeah.
I'd be intrigued.
I don't know.
Yeah, well, we'll find out one day.
So they're talking about the maze and say that it took them 4 years to make. They show them the bare bones of what they have so far.
Yeah.
And they're asking questions, but they're getting kind of like really vague responses
Mhm.
from the Wicked personnel, which is just that it's going to be like a testing zone. And more specifically, that it is Wicked and Teresa and Thomas's little secret. And there's two others from the other group, the girl group, that they will not intermingle. Aris and
Yeah.
Rachel, who will help too.
Yeah.
So,
And Thomas that night decides that he's going to see if his door unlocks. He's going to be a bad boy for once.
okay.
And he's surprised to find that his door does in fact unlock, because he was under the impression that it was just like locked every night. And he was like, "Oh, I guess I'm not as much of a prisoner as I thought." And while he's roaming, he ends up running into Newt immediately, and Newt's like, "Oh, go wake up the girl Teresa and come to my hiding spot." So he gets to meet Albie and Mino in a little maintenance room in the basement. And they go hang out there at night when they're bored.
Yeah, I really love this moment because this is when Newt just decides to hijack the whole situation. Is like, I really think we need to show him Group B first. I think it's really important. And the guys are like, what? And Tommy says, they're like, just go with it. Just go with it. And that's where we meet
Yeah.
Newt likes to go just kind of watch his sister sleep.
Okay, stalker.
It's sad though.
That's so
It's
mean.
really sad.
It is really sad, but it's also weird because it's like, are there just like, because like they have clearly like a window that they're watching through and they see like all of these people sleeping. So it's like, is it just a window that anybody can get to? Like, did they go outside? Like, where did they actually go find this window looking into this room?
You know,
Oh my god,
I
yeah.
thought, yeah, I thought it was just like a window where, like, oh, for some reason they found a secret passage and they can
That would make
only they can look
sense.
through it. But now that you bring it up, it's like, oh, did anyone else have access to that window?
Yeah, right?
I also really love this moment because this is when Newt is like, they changed my name and I will never remember mine, but I'll remember Sonia's. It's Lizzie, that's my sister. And which we just called out in the epilogue, his name was always Newt.
Yeah, that does
Yeah, yeah. So
sink to my brain.
No.
so funny. But then they keep meeting up at nights. They have like actual friends, which is cool for them. And one night they're like, "Hey, let's go up the ladder and go outside because it's cold out, and we're gonna break the rules." So they go outside and they get busted immediately. The guards are like, "What the hell, y'all? We've been watching you. Like, it was fine that you were sneaking around to hang out. We don't care, but you can't go outside. There's dangers outside."
Yeah, they are like, we don't want you to escape because we know that you guys are like, oh, I don't know. We kind of left that headquarters and we saw some waves crashing against rocky cliffs and the world looked nice. So, you know what? We're going to teach you a little lesson and we're going to show you that actually we are protecting you from the cranks and this is where we go down to the crank pit. Hooey.
Yeah,
Ooh-wee.
quite a frightening time.
Yeah, yeah. So they go inside this like tunnel, and there is just a group of cranks that like are basically separated by like a little like wall barrier thing like that, and they just go, "Hey, you are all immune. Go on in, mingle with the cranks," which like kind of fun, kind of like when you have a different school come to your school dance. They end up finding a single crank with a chalkboard. How we got it, we don't know. But he's holding a wicked is good sign. And he's like, "Hey, I'm a crank with a chalkboard. Come on and talk to me." And they're like, "Okay, Mr. Crank." And then
Do you
he
think they did that democratically? Like, how did they elect who gets the chalkboard? Do they have elections? What is it?
they threw a single chalkboard and like a pack of chalk and they went, "Fight for it, guys."
It really does make you wonder, like, yeah, where to get it, and of course, I also feel
Like,
like
why does he have it? Because like my initial thought was like, oh, this crank like can't speak, so he has like a board to write things on. But then he's talking to them completely normally. So I'm like, then why are we?
it's like, I feel like it adds a dramatic flair into the scene, and I also feel like this
Yeah,
definitely the kind of moment where it's like, oh, look at this homage, look at this, we're making a reference to something in the series, with a wicked is gone
yeah,
motto.
Oh yeah, because it does say "wicked is good" on it.
yeah, yeah.
Which
Um,
did this crank write it? We don't know, but we do learn this crank is a very important guy. His name is John Michael. He actually created the Post Flare Coalition, and he's got a lot of emotions, going from
yeah,
crying to angry.
yeah.
Try-
He also was the former chancellor, and that is important because it also helps us understand that like even the mighty can fall victim to this disease. But John Michael, he goes from 0 to 100, back to 50, back to 0 to 100. He ends up choking Mino for little to no reason, and these 9 year olds have to fight an adult, which again makes me question that James Dashner forgot that he was writing a book about children.
Okay, but here's the thing, I forgot. At this point,
yeah,
at this moment, I remember thinking they were probably like around 11 or 12 years old. But now that you're reminding me,
They're
oh,
not.
they're only like 8 or 9, it's like,
They're like yeah.
okay.
Could you imagine like a third grader and being like, "Hey, third grader, go in with a bunch of crazy adults that want to eat you." And then they're like, then one of the crazy ones is starting to just fight a pack of 8 year olds, and the 8 year olds are somehow doing well. Like, are you joking?
Yeah, Albie somehow tackles this guy.
That's right.
Like Albie weighs 80 pounds. What can he do?
And then to really add insult to injury, they shoot John because he got the flare when Wicked is escorting the kids out. And this really shakes them up a bit.
Yeah, the guards
Like,
are like, okay, this punishment escalated too quickly.
Yeah, again, with the little kids there, and now you've got Randall doing the whole like mercy killing on John
Yeah.
Michael.
yeah. The kids fall into an existential crisis, specifically Thomas, who is now being like, are they lying to me about being immune? I mean, the cranks really shook him up. And he wakes
Yeah.
up with a bad headache, some stomach pains.
Yeah. And the guards are like, hey, you're not allowed to hang out with like those people for a couple more years. So now he's all alone again, and that's such a bummer.
But luckily, at his saving grace, Teresa has learned how to talk to him in his head, and she's like, I'll teach you how to do this later. If you can hear me banging on the walls, let me know. And he does. So it's not all bad.
But then he doesn't learn it. Like, we don't really see him learning it. There was a flashback, I think, in book 1, about like Teresa like helping him learn it. But we kind of just leave off with him being like Teresa being like, I'll help you. And then the next chapter is like, a year later, Thomas had mastered telepathy. And I was like, well, okay, we're just skipping forward. That's
It's just a
fine.
training montage.
But yeah, exactly. Yeah, but they're building the maze at this point too. So they're kind of knee deep in their efforts, and they're really coming into their own.
Yeah. So it's been a while since Thomas and Teresa have seen their friends, and luckily Teresa has figured out how to trick the security cameras with a loop so that they can break out and go see their buddies. But as they're going to see their buddies, they run into a small kid crying in the hallway, and it's Chuck.
Yeah, he's new. And he ends up, coming to hang out with Mino, Newt, and Albie. And Mino's like, forget the new guy plot point. I'm gonna escape. So like, we kind of get another added dose in here.
Oh, poor Chuck. Never has his time to shine.
He and
Oh, and he's
it
like,
broke
oh,
my
by the way,
heart
yeah.
when he
Sorry,
showed
go
up.
ahead. Oh, go ahead, Arthur.
I was gonna say that it broke my heart when he first showed up because it's like, oh no, I know
Right?
about your fate, and it's very emotional. Even though I mean, he sacrifices himself for Thomas.
Yeah. No, it's like
I know.
Chuck's death was really, really sad and very unexpected. And I had even read the book previously, and I forgot that happened. And I was like, oh damn, I forgot. This is so sad. So even like seeing him back, I totally agree with you, Arthur. I was like, oh damn, it's really like sad that they're like, he's like all our little brother, and he's still going to just like meet a horrible, horrible death.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the means of which he will die, the maze, is coming together.
Yeah.
Bad
And
news for Chuck.
But Mino also is like, oh, by the way, there's another new kid, Gally, and he's gonna help me escape tomorrow night. So Mino's got a whole plan that we don't know the details of. We just know it's gonna happen.
Yeah. I cannot believe that Teresa and Thomas have not brought up the fact that the maze is a thing to them at this point. I feel like I
Yeah.
would.
Like, right? I feel like if
Yeah.
I was a child that really couldn't, have a fully matured brain, I'd probably just be telling people everything I did during the day, I'd be like, yeah, we're building these mazes because they said they're going to test everybody. Isn't that wild?
Yeah, but keep in mind
Yeah.
how they're
Oh,
listening,
yeah.
though. These kids are listened to be apparently older than we think they really are, and so I guess Thomas and Teresa, they're going to act, more precociously and be more secretive, I guess, according to
That
how
is
James
Yeah.
Baxter
true.
writes them.
Their dialogue is very mature and advanced.
Yeah.
They also keep utilizing these kids, especially like Teresa and Thomas, for tasks that are like way beyond them. I mean, what? They're 9 right now, and they're trying to have them create an optical illusion that makes the walls in the maze look bigger than they are, and also
Yes.
trick them with a sky in the maze
Yeah.
at this moment,
And
which
how
is
the
crazy.
technology works, we don't know, but we just know these 10-year-olds have figured it out.
They figured it out. Mino's got plans to escape. I mean, they all got stuff that is cooking in their
They're all
brains.
intelligent.
Yeah. Dr. Page. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, Thomas is woken up in the middle of the night almost immediately after learning about Mino's escape. And they've brought him to like their like little surveillance room, and they're like, hey, we need to teach you a lesson because Mino escaped, which doesn't really make sense because Thomas didn't say he wanted to escape, nor was Thomas entertaining the idea of it. But Mino, a 10-year-old boy, is tied to a chair and has been beaten up already, apparently. And they decide to introduce the monster from the first book, the Griever, and just have it like slink around Mino's body. And Thomas just gets to watch Mino scream his head off. Yeah, it's too much. It's too much because it's a 10-year-old.
This is one of the most frightening scenes
Yeah.
in the book, I think, when I first looked at
Right?
them.
Right? It's like it's kind of just like chilling that I'm just like I feel like I would be like less distressed if it was like a 30-year-old man, but it's like it's a literal child.
The way it's written too is like mist is pouring out of this holding cell that the griever is in as it
Fog
opens
machine.
slowly, and just horrifying all around as it
Yeah.
like has Mino in its grasp, and the only way that these people will stop is like Thomas is having a full-on breakdown, and then once he's like, please, I'll do anything, the griever stops and the people are like, interesting, we will record your empathy as a really good tool.
Yeah.
And
And they're like,
I'm
but we were
what?
never they're like, but for the record, we weren't gonna let anything bad happen to him. And Thomas is like, well, how was I supposed to know that? And then they go, we have to show this to Rachel, Aris, and Teresa too. And it's like Aris and Rachel don't even know who Mino is. Like, what are we doing?
It is
Hey, I mean,
ruthless.
I get it. When you're a performer and you got a good routine, you want to show other people. I get it.
Very true.
Milk it all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But needless to say, this really fucks Mino up. Like he doesn't go and see them at night for a year. Albie just tells Thomas that Mino's different now,
He should be,
which makes
understandable.
sense because he's literally right. Like he's
Yeah.
PTSD.
traumatized.
He's seen so much.
And even like the
So now it's just Albie.
Beavers are so like so. Even like whenever I read about them in the books, and they have like like the blades or like the other metal instruments poking
Yeah.
out of their small cow-sized bodies.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would argue a Griever is even like scarier than all of like those creatures that they had in the Hunger Games. Like I think the Griever might be the scariest one because like I'm thinking of like Hunger Games. We had those Cracker Jacks. We had the mutt, like the dog mutts with like the people's eyes, and like that was scary.
Yes.
But the Grievers were like they're like next level.
I mean, I thought the mutts were pretty scary. That's like a
Mutts
person's
were pretty scary. Like
face.
they're really close. They're really close.
True. So much.
It was also Arthur. How did you like picture the Grievers? Because I know it kept saying the size of a small cow, but I kind of pictured it as like a slug that would.
I think it was just a giant slug.
Yeah, basically,
Right?
it was like a slug-like creature, and I've seen glimpses of how they look like in the movies, but I've never seen the movies. I don't even know like have a clear I don't have a clear picture of what they look like in the movies. But I'm focusing more on the books and how they're written. And yeah, more like a slug, just like this like this giant, like not giant, but like a small cow-sized grayish slug with like like the. It's like spears, right? Or spears. I think some chainsaws, maybe.
Mhm.
Generally, metal appendages
Yeah.
poking out of their bodies, and they're always, and even it's always a
Yeah.
small cow. That's always used as like the size comparison. I remember that description.
Yeah.
Small cow.
Yeah, because I will say, Arthur, I remember like even the first time I read this book and the second time, like because there's parts of the Grievers that are steel, and I couldn't get over like the size of a small cow, so I really just pictured like a really menacing mechanical bull as a Griever. And in this book, it's described more as a worm, which I get now. But in the first book, I would argue that you could make a deduction that it is just a mechanical bull that attacks them.
It's revealed that these grievers were something that were made by the government, and even worse news, Dr. Page tells Thomas that they're sending people into the maze, and Thomas is kind of piecing together that maybe these grievers will be something that they're gonna have to go up against if they're sending
Yeah.
people into the maze.
But we also get a scene of Thomas just like hanging out in the forest and being really proud of his work in the maze and being like, I'm really excited that my friends are going to get to hang out here. It's going to be so awesome. I think they're going to like this forest just as much as I do. And Thomas is like, for somebody who's supposed to be like their smartest person that they have, the fact that he can't piece together that this is a part of like a more like sinister motive is a little strange to me.
Yeah, that was odd. It's like,
Oh
yeah,
my
are you
god.
catching on to the details here? And granted, I get that maybe that's how like the plot is supposed to work. Like, oh, Thomas is meant to be a little oblivious to
Yeah.
everything, but it leaves the reader, i.e., me, going, "Well, Thomas, I'm catching on to all of these details, but you're not."
It
Yeah,
is
right?
so funny how stupid they make him look. And then it's like always him and Teresa working on the maze. Like in this moment they're trying to cover up the griever hole together with some optical illusion. And it's always her doing all the work and then Thomas is happy about his work and she's like it's kind of crazy to think how many kids are going to die in this maze, right?
Yeah,
And he's
yeah.
just like, "No, they wouldn't do that."
Right? Like, oh, like Thomas. There is a really cute scene as we're like really quickly approaching like the maze day that Thomas and Teresa do team up to help Newt say goodbye to his sister, which is really cute.
Yes. Not much happens before that. They just have a meeting with Ramirez and some other people about how they're going to become elite candidates and liaisons between the groups, which is even worse because Ramirez then introduces them into Group B.
Mhm.
And they're not going to be popular. They're like coming in being like, "Hello, we have these two kids who are more special than the entire group
Yeah, that
here."
we like more than you all. Isn't that fun?
Again, I'm pretty
Yes, and
sure
then
it's all
I
on
think
purpose, as a variable, probably, you know?
Yeah, right?
and then Thomas is like, "Well, that was pretty embarrassing," and introduces Newt to his sister. Which,
Yeah.
hey, I mean, being VIP's got some perks. Clearly, Teresa sets this whole thing up. Thomas is like, "Newt, let's go see your sister." They got
Yeah. No,
status.
yeah, and Newt literally says like I like it wasn't exactly word for word, but he also says like he basically says what he said the first time he saw Lizzie is like I will never let them I forgive them for taking you away from me and it's like Newt, we know. We already heard this from you.
Mhm.
Um but the next day the chancellor does tell Teresa, Thomas, Ars and Rachel that like hey you elites, just a heads up, a crank is missing from our pit. We were doing a little crank count and one's missing. So
We did our little
Terrifying.
crank lineup, and we
yeah.
we played Duck Duck
Them
Goose.
going to the crank bits being like roll call.
Amazing one. Wait,
um
I forget, was there a specific way that they could track all of them? Like, was it like, "Oh, we have, like, the tracking of chance," or was that not explained? I forget.
I don't think it was explained how they know like how they figure out the cranks are there or
Okay.
missing
But did they do,
because
like, a roll
like
call or something like that?
yeah.
I don't know.
I feel like I do love the idea of a head count, and they just like
Yeah.
make one, two.
But I also like picture it almost like as like if you were like a farmer and you had a bunch of like cows in a pen that you'd have to just like sit with a clipboard being like 1, 2. Oh, that one moved. Okay, start over. 1, 2. Oh nope, that one moved again. I already counted that one. Okay, 1, 2.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And then they also, okay, so not only are one of the cranks missing, they think there's an outbreak among Wicked personnel, which again is just deductive reasoning on their behalf.
Yeah,
They're
that it's
just
like
like,
if they're thinking it, it's already happened. That's just kind of how the way this virus works.
mhm.
But now it's the day. The day has come for the maze to start, and they're sending 40 from Group A and 40 from Group B into the maze. And everybody, this is a very very big plot hole because in the actual Maze Runner book. It is said that Mino has been there the longest of all of them because he was in the initial group that arrived. And now in this book, Mino, Gally, Albie, Newt, they're all going in at the exact same time, which doesn't make sense with the actual lore of the first book and what was explicitly
Wow.
said.
Interesting.
So I'm
That was
calling James
impressive.
Kastner out because that's an easy plot hole to just to include, you know? Like why would
Wow.
you why are we doing this? So I digress, but I just really I'm very passionate about the plot holes when you are doing prequels. I get
Yeah.
prequels are hard, but you shouldn't forget where you came from.
Exactly.
Yes,
It's also
yeah.
important to note they're pushing the maze trials up to last 2 years instead of 5 and making the variables harder.
Mhm.
Which is
Let's
not
just
good.
crank it all up, you know? Let's just make it
Yeah.
all more intense.
Yeah, put that dial to 100, right?
Yeah, and oh, this is a pretty when they're about to go into the maze, it's a pretty sad scene because Thomas's friends turn on him. Mino's like fighting him, like you guys aren't even going in. You don't even know what's going on. Gally runs up to them asking for help. And then Thomas feels possessed by Wicked, as we know they will take over your brain to say there's nothing he can do. I would also hate that guy. Sorry.
Right? Like, right.
It's
Honestly,
so
I
good.
wonder if like Thomas was like a kind of a person that they were like, we need to get close to him because he has intel on Wicked, but we're all gonna like make fun of him behind his back.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
yeah, understandably frustrating for the other kids to be like, "Oh, Thomas being a jerk here," and of course, it reminded me
For
of even
sure.
like when Daddy also had his own brain, they're controlling him, and of course, in the first book,
Yeah.
with the knife.
It is hard too because it's like up until this point they don't know that they can really control their brain. They just think that they're monitoring it. So he just doesn't
Yeah.
know what is happening. But he really wants to keep a close eye on his friends. So he asks Dr. Page. Well, actually, Dr. Page asks him if he wants the day off so he can watch his friends in the maze. And this is kind of where he's realizing that his friends have no idea where they are because their
Yeah.
memories have been swiped.
Thomas is like, yeah, that'll make me feel better to see them really taking the work I did on this maze. And these poor kids are like just freaking out because they don't remember anything. They don't know what's going on. And Thomas,
Mino's climbing a wall.
yeah, and people are cheering Mino on, which I thought was very funny.
Climb that wall,
But yeah, it's just,
Come
yeah,
on,
right.
Mino.
You got it. But then Mino's like, this is too high. We can't keep doing this.
Imagine that is their only activity in there. It's just people climbing the vines.
Instead
Probably.
of a maze, it's just a rock climbing wall.
Yes.
But we get a lot of scenes of him just watching bits and pieces of the maze as this book continues. But Chuck does become Thomas's assistant as he's taking in days of the maze and things like that. And Chuck's having fun with it.
There is a really slapstick comedy scene that comes after this where they're sending this boy Zart. First of all, his name's Zart up into the glade, and they're having like difficulty putting him in the box because they forgot to build a door in the box. So it's like the nurses have sedated them and they're trying to like feed him over
Hoist
the
him up.
edge,
Yeah.
That was
and then they
tragedy.
accidentally drop him
It was
in the
it was
box. It was such a funny
it
scene.
was amusing,
Yeah.
surprisingly amusing. Um, and even like
Yes.
God, it's like so
Yeah,
much
I
having that
agree.
name. That
Right?
name.
I agree. I
I
wish there was
know.
kind of just like more dumb scenes like that in this book to just kind of like just add like a different layer of tone that you're not expecting. Cause like it is really funny because they even comment on it being like, isn't there a better way to do this? And they're like, no, this is just kind of the way we gotta do things.
And I know that we always hated on Frypan's name because we were like, what's the philosopher behind Frypan? Who is the philosopher behind Zart?
That
They're
is
all named after philosophers.
And scientists, yeah.
strange,
So I don't
strange,
know.
strange.
We again,
And it's Teresa.
I
Teresa's
don't know.
name
Arthur.
is Teresa named like after Mother Teresa, I think.
Oh, is she really?
I
that's what I was thinking,
that's
but
what I
I was
always
like,
thought.
that's not like a scientist or anything. Cause like, I don't
I don't
know.
know.
Arthur, you got any ideas for the Zart origin? Do you think you know where Zart comes from?
Absolutely no idea. Although I feel like maybe there could be like some Roman figure maybe who has a name like a full name, but then the name gets shortened to Zot, like Zartalonius or something
Yeah.
like that. That's my
Yeah,
That's
I can
thinking.
fair.
definitely see that.
I like to imagine Zart just stands for zesty fart. Um,
Yeah. That's my
so
favorite scientist.
anyways, our boy Zart is struggling in the box until one day George comes back and he's like, welcome to the glade. And George and his buddy Nick kind of seem like they're like higher ups in the glade and
Mhm.
they're out one day running. and Nick and George come back, and there's a scuffle that Thomas doesn't really know what's going on, but Albie is punching George because George tried to bite him. And this
Yeah.
is when we see things go very badly in the maze.
Very quickly, Thomas gets a front row seat to watch George yet again being a menace, attacking Albie, and he has to watch Albie kill him with a spear.
Yeah, it's pretty nuts. George is like, they stung me, and Frypan, who we learn at this point was named Siggy for Sigmund Freud, is like, wait, I saw a needle come up with food yesterday. Maybe that'll help. And folks, that doesn't help George. George just gets worse to the point that Albie does have to stab him, like Laura said.
Through the neck.
Yeah, and it's so funny because
in the neck,
I think my favorite thing of this scene is like Thomas was so struck that like something stung George. Like he was like stung? That's the worst thing that could happen. And it's like, really? That's the like most horrific action that could happen here?
Yeah.
In this post-apocalyptic landscape.
But he is shocked. He is gagged and gooped by all of this.
Thomas having a hard time. He's like, I gotta go find some answers. So he shows up to the Wicked conference room and he knocks on the door, and Dr. Page is like, well, we kind of mutated a version of the flare and it takes a hold of the immunes. And we just want to kind of see what happens when a griever strikes them with it. Okay. But the serum hasn't been perfected yet. That is important. They're just kind of messing around.
So wait a minute. I have a question, because we know in the last book the flare mutates on its own and it does it quickly. And now we're hearing that the grievers stick people with a mutated version of the flare, and they have a serum clearly in the first book that solves it. So couldn't they just try this serum on a bunch of cranks and it would work on some of them, hypothetically?
Oh my God, Laura.
Damn. I'm good at this, y'all.
Oh my. Laura, you're
oh my God.
You're catching all the troubles.
They really did not figure out, why did they not try the serum from the maze? I feel like that was like, either James Dashner planted that for people like us to figure out, or
he just was like, no, it's different. It's different. And it's like, no, this is the world you wrote. I'm backing it up with your own details.
Wow. That's crazy. Well, anyways, the glade is slowly coming together. That is, no, seriously, that is nuts.
Yeah, I'm going to think about that for a while, I think.
And Thomas is just in classes or watching his friends. That's really all that goes on. When Wicked one day, they bring in a new subject, Ben, who you might remember from the original Maze Runner, kind of lost his mind and tries to attack Thomas.
Oh, yeah.
And he's here from the elusive Denver, the foreign place where all of the immunities live. And Thomas is confused because Ben says his parents, they don't have the virus, and he was actually ripped away from him. And Thomas is like, whoa, they're not supposed to do that.
Yeah, and he's like, well, at least, your parents didn't get killed like Newt's, basically.
Yeah, Thomas isn't good at being a good tour guide. He would do horrible on college campuses.
No, because he stops his tour to be like, you know what? I gotta go watch my little system right now, because Gally's on the screen, and Gally's got a weird look on his face, and Gally just like sacrifices himself to a griever for no reason.
Oh yeah. Local weirdo sacrifices himself to the griever. He goes out and stands in the face.
The Glade paper came out the next day with that headline.
Gally goes through so much crap in the series and on the road.
Yeah, then that's Gally. He's our resident weirdo, and the boys have to administer some serum to him. And Ben, the guy who Thomas is supposed to be attending to, sees this, and he's obviously a little upset. But Thomas is like, no, it's okay. Everything's fine here. And it's not. Yeah. But Thomas does find a research tablet, and he goes through it later that night. And this is when Thomas, if he has any idea that Wicked might be bad, this is where it really gets summarized that it is, because he learns the virus was man-made and was administered to people for population control, and it got out of hand.
And this is when Thomas is like, oh, so we're the bad guys.
Finally, he's realizing this.
Finally, he got there.
Yep.
There's a scene shortly after this where, like, it's winter, and like Thomas, Teresa, and Chuck are hanging out outside just to get some fresh air. And Chuck's being his goofy little self, and there's a literal line that says, Chuck oinked like a little pig, and that made everyone feel better because that's what Chuck does. And I was like, I'm sorry, what?
I guess he's just supposed to be the jester in the group, the class clown comedian.
Can you imagine
Yeah.
if that was his tick when he's scared? They're like out here right now. They're going for a walk. There's snow in May. They see a sick Randall coming up, and he's like got the flare, and Chuck's just oinking like a pig. It's like
Yeah.
his tick when he's afraid. Could you imagine? That'd be something.
That'd be really funny.
Yes.
But yeah, that is essentially oh my gosh, I lost my notes.
Oh, this is when they've just gone outside. Randall's got the flares,
Yes,
which
yes.
is spelling a lot of turmoil for the rest of this book.
Yeah.
Because
Dr. Page is like, hey, so things are bad. Randall has the flare. So it's time for the purge.
Yes, this is crazy. This is a crazy scene. So once again, we think they're probably maybe like 11 at this point in the
I think
timeline.
since the maze has started, and it's maybe like it's still like early in, so they'd be like 14 at this point because Thomas is 16 when he's in the maze,
Okay.
so he's probably 14.
So a bit older,
Crazy.
so
So
not like a
Dr. Page-
kid, but a teenager. You know.
So
Yeah.
imagine a 14-year-old. You just got your learner's permit. And this person is like, we need you to sneak into the chancellor's chambers, get records to see whose blood tests say they got the flare, and then we're gonna do a little insane thing where we have you kill all of them. So Dr. Page grabs Aris and Rachel, and she's like, listen, you guys are immune. We're gonna send you into this Sector D and give you needles to plunge into these people's necks, my colleagues, because they're immune and they're gonna kill them. These 14-year-olds.
Yeah, and they're like, okay. So like they don't really like I'm shocked that at no point are they really like, isn't there a better way to do this? Because even the way that they're enacting this purge is clunky because it's like they all get like one different weapon and they kind of have to like pass the baton back to each other. Like they have to use the launcher grenade, and then they have to stun the other guy with this thing, and then they have to get the syringe out and take the protective cap off of it and then stab it into the person, and that's what kills them. Like,
Yeah.
there has to be a better way.
It's a rudimentary scheme, definitely. But you know what? Wicked apparently just wants to get this over with, and they don't have any better plans, seemingly. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, why not just like light the place on fire? But anyways, I guess all of the kids besides Thomas has Thomas has hesitance. The other kids don't. They all go in. And at first they kill the Chancellor Anderson. He's barely alive. He's got 2 fingers left on his hand.
Yeah, this is one of
that point.
most graphic scenes, I think, in the book. Like,
Yeah.
when it's like, he bit off 8 of his fingers, and it was just like, when they first go into the room, and it was like, okay, we're searching for Anderson, where is he? I was like, okay, something frightening is gonna happen here. But my brain was not heading in that specific direction of like body horror with fingers.
I know.
Yeah.
And he's using his 2 fingers to write out a memo that is essentially saying to all of their colleagues that Wicked is evil, they should just let nature win, let the immunities back in. And he also says to Thomas that they're going to take out his brain in the end.
And he also does tell Thomas that he hopes his fingers were tasty. So, like, maybe can we trust this guy?
Maybe he's a genius. I don't know.
Yeah.
Thomas plunges the thing into his neck and kills him, and they're on to the next one. They got to go kill more people.
I want to pause on this for a second because it was like Thomas, the most apprehensive, steps up immediately and is like, I gotta be the one to kill this guy. When it's like, wait, Thomas, were you really as apprehensive and the good guy? Because you're the one being like, I'm gonna do the bidding here, everyone. Okay.
I guess he was just so patterned, I guess, over time.
Exactly.
Yeah, why isn't he the one holding the launcher grenade like Aris and Rachel are?
Yeah, Thomas, how guilty do you feel? You didn't have to pick that role. There's 4 other options here.
Yeah, Teresa's got the gun. Teresa's the most bloodthirsty. So they're going to the next room. They have to kill 5 people, and there's 2 in the hallway being crazy. You guessed it, kill these people because Rachel and Aris disable them with the launchers, and then there's 17 left.
Yeah, and then it moves pretty quickly that it's like the next room had 11 and they killed 11, and then it's like, okay, and then they got the last 2 tackled Teresa. Thomas saves her because that's what Thomas does.
Save the girl.
And then they're all dead.
And Dr. Levitt
They
is one of the
kill-
pranks.
Yeah.
Yep, they killed Dr. Levitt, who was choking Teresa, all before lunch.
Yeah.
All in a day's work. Now they got their lunch break.
Yeah, good. Honestly, I love when we get to wake up early and be so productive that by lunchtime everything's done.
They probably have room for yoga. They got so much the rest of their day.
Okay, and I'll be honest, because they mentioned the purge a few times throughout the initial trilogy, and the way they made the purge sound there, that it was like a days long huge thing, and it's like the purge was only killing 19 people in 3 hours. Really?
Mm-hmm.
That was the purge?
Yeah, I mean,
okay, it's just interesting. It's interesting.
Also, I would say the purge, it kept reminding me of the horror movie franchise, as in the purge.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like they're not going to be punished for this for sure. They're actually being encouraged to do this by the government, which is the purge. Makes you think. But this event really fucks up Thomas. He doesn't watch Screens of the Maze often. I mean, he still does.
Yeah.
It's like weaning yourself off something you really like. But he does notice Newt is hurt, and he kind of pieces together from the clips what happens. And we know what happens. We've read the old books, but Newt, to sum it up, was moseying around the glade one day in the graveyard, contemplating death, as you do, having an existential crisis. And he goes into the maze, and he climbs up the side of the walls in the vine. And he's like, I hope you're happy, to the beetle that is watching him. And he jumps off the walls trying to kill himself. Yeah, it's really sad.
Yep.
Yeah, but he does survive, like, instantly. Like, doesn't even pass out. He just lands and is like, screw you guys.
And he breaks his leg and just... Oh.
He does,
sad,
which
yeah.
I don't know how they fix it, but I mean, they somehow fix his leg.
Well, no, they said he had a limp in the first book.
Oh, I was imagining he was laying there and had like a broken leg.
Oh, I don't know. Well,
but
Teresa's gonna knock on Thomas's door now and be like, hey, did you read these 2 really weird memos? And the first one is from Thomas saying, I did the purge, it was only me, and it had to be done. Ava Page is chancellor now. Congratulate her when you see her walking in the hallways or in the break room. And then the second one is a really well-written note from Chancellor Anderson being like, whoa, things got out of hand. And Thomas is like, this is weird because I read Chancellor Anderson's goodbye note, and also the purge was not my idea. And he goes to Dr. Page, and she's like, hey, I had to wrote that to like put people's minds at ease. And it's just kind of like, oh, okay. Like, he doesn't really like fight back or anything with it. He's just kind of like, you should have asked me first. And she's like, yeah, okay. And he's like, okay.
It seems like a really easy conclusion. She's like, oh, I was just using it as a bridge between the old and new organization. He was like, that makes sense.
Again, oblivious. Come on. Thomas, don't be so ignorant.
I know, seriously. Thomas is sad. Just wants a normal life. Him and Teresa are growing distant.
They're growing distant. Weeks are going by. Now it's 1 month before Chuck is going in, so he's losing his little assistant.
He's really sad, but we do get an introduction to some characters we know in the past. Dr. Page has a meeting with people and Thomas and Teresa and introduces Jorge and Brenda to them.
And
Brenda's a nurse.
I really think introducing these characters here wasn't a good writer's choice, because they were introduced in the second book, and then like Thomas obviously like has memories coming back, and like Brenda's like really introducing herself to Thomas and like all of this. So the fact that in those books she never mentioned like we've actually met before was really, really off-putting to me.
Yeah. Yeah, that is annoying.
Yeah.
It is. It's
But,
very confusing
yeah.
because obviously Brenda's much older than them. They're getting like established jobs in Wicked, making their age gap relationship weird. She says that they're going to work together soon. Brenda and Jorge are going to the Scorch, and she think it would have value to them to have them there to monitor long distance effectiveness, which is very suspicious. But Thomas
Yeah.
is having a goodbye breakfast with Chuck the next day, so he can't think about this too much.
Another sad
Yeah, a lot is
moment.
going on. He says goodbye to Chuck.
A lot is
Yeah.
happening. Chuck and him have this breakfast. Chuck is like, "What happens when I'm there? Does this just go on forever?" And it's kind of like their final goodbye that we didn't really get in the first one, which
Yeah.
is kind of a nice closure. And Thomas is like, "I hear they're close to getting a blueprint, and then we'll be reunited." Which Thomas doesn't know that, but that is
Yeah, Thomas
fine.
is really just feeding it to him. But then Thomas is suddenly on the Berg with Brenda and Jorge, and Thomas does not like being on the Berg. He says it makes his tummy feel weird. But Brenda
Thanks, slide.
and yeah, and he's really only going so they can like still see if they can track his brain when he like goes far away. So they're trying to be like, if we stay here, do we still get to see what's going on there? And so yeah, he's literally like going there just to come straight back, which I was like, that's kind of hilarious.
Another
But
test.
Brenda and Thomas,
Another test, yeah.
yes, I know, but Brenda and Thomas have like this weird like talk, and Brenda's like, you should let love into your life.
Oh my
Uh,
god, yeah.
it's weird. And then
He's
she's
like,
like,
"Be
oh,
nicer to Teresa. She cares a lot about you."
yeah, and then she's like, okay, bye. See you guys when you get to the Scorch for phase 2. And Thomas is like, phase 2?
Yep.
There's another step? And I was
More,
like,
more,
Thomas, I
more.
guarantee you could have found this information at any point in time.
I know, it's insane that Brenda was like, "It's a real bummer that they're bringing your friends here next." Brenda,
Yeah, just
come
Brenda.
on.
letting that detail slip out, and like, and like, was that meant to be on purpose? Was she doing that on purpose as like another variable?
I don't know. Yeah. Maggie and I have talked a lot about our
That's a good
Brenda's
question.
motives, like more like bad. Like what are her actual motives?
Like, is she genuinely just no thoughts, head empty?
I
I
don't
don't
Because I
know.
don't,
think
I
so.
don't
I
think
think there's
so.
more going on. I think she and Teresa
I
are like
agree.
that, but like they both have their secrets going on, their motives. You know, they're both working behind the scenes. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Thomas, he gets there, they say goodbye. There's a flat trans there. Excuse me. He is going to go immediately through this flat trans, gets to the other side, and everyone's like, yay, it worked, you're back. Let's all head to the main building. And Thomas is like, I'm gonna walk through the woods because I would love to be outside in some cool, fresh air because the scorch was too hot.
Gonna walk.
He's needs to think. I mean, he's just asked Dr. Page about this phase 2 thing, and like
Yeah.
he's now like, you know what? I'm gonna go into the maze to save my friends. So he's got to take a walk to
How
really
he's
think.
gonna do that, we don't know, but he's gonna get there and figure it out.
He also wants to convince them to let him into the maze with his memories. I was like, buddy, good luck.
Oblivious.
Yeah.
That's not gonna happen. So he gets back home to Alaska and he is going to mull on how he's going to get weapons to people in the maze. He's going to take this little walk. He's got 2 guards who are walking with him this path. And they're like, "You know what, Thomas, buddy, we haven't seen many cranks out here, but we should hurry because it's cold."
They spoke too soon because Randall, resident crank of the woods, shows up immediately. And he immediately, I think he kills one of them instantly because one of them just plain old disappears.
Yeah.
And then Thomas and Randall have to fight. Thomas calls Teresa for backup. It's an unnecessary action sequence of just everything, but
Yeah,
yeah.
it seems like Thomas ends up killing Randall, and it's like his first up close kill because he hits him with the launcher and then crushes his face with a gun.
Yeah.
And he's really shaken up by this. He's like,
Yeah.
"Teresa, they are never gonna find the cure. So
Yeah,
listen,
he's like,
I have a lot planned."
he was like, I was fine killing the 20 other cranks before lunch the other day, but Randall in the woods is the one that's really weighing on me.
Yeah, just whacking the weapon down on his head. You know, that's the one that traumatizes
Right?
him the most out of
Oh my
all of the
gosh.
kills.
Which is kind of crazy because it's like Randall wasn't even nice to you.
Yeah, like why would you feel bad?
Who knows? I don't know. But he's giving Teresa the lowdown on his plan, which is like, listen, I'm thinking we convince them to send us into the maze for a bit and figure out stuff. In the meantime, out here, like how to shut down the grievers, place weapons near the maze exit, map out a town we can escape to. And then if
Hmm.
we go in with our memories, we're going to know that. We got to do this for Chuck. And Teresa's
Yeah.
in. She's like, okay, I'll do it. Yeah.
Yeah, so he's kind of really hoping he can plot a real escape with that. And Dr. Page approves of this. She thinks like this will be a great way to wrap up the maze trials and get kickstarted on the next phase. And everything's all set. And
It's
then
looking pretty good. Teresa's giving him
yeah,
code to find weapons near the maze. They have all this knowledge on what to do. There's a town like 30 miles away they can escape to.
yeah, and then Teresa and Thomas are like they have a little cuddle session and like talk about it the night before they're supposed to get everything started. So
We've never
yeah.
gotten a kiss in this series. It was all kissing on the cheeks. They're hugging and crying
No,
Yeah,
they
and
kissed
laying
in
down to
yeah.
fall asleep.
Wait, no, Maggie, they kissed in Scorch Trials, and
Well,
they kissed a few times in Scorch Trials.
I thought they kissed once, which like does that even
No,
count? Because the government was controlling
they
her.
kiss in the tunnel, and then they kiss again
okay.
as they're going down to catch up with the other group with Aris,
Because I was thinking of
who
Brenda
after
and
he
Thomas
betrayed
kissing.
him.
I was thinking of Brenda and Thomas,
Yeah,
but okay, Teresa.
Brenda and Thomas don't kiss.
They never kiss, and thank God. I mean,
He kisses
Okay,
him on the cheek, and it's like implied, but Teresa and Thomas do kiss.
okay, you are right. I
right.
guess there was no emotion behind it, so I was always like, do those kisses count?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
because
There was
the
emotion in the
romance.
first one,
Yeah, the romance. I feel like the romance never truly like blossoms fully. You know what I mean? I feel like there could have been more of the romantic
Yeah,
vibes. It's much more
though.
focused on the
Yeah,
gritty action and the stress and the anxiety. You know?
yeah.
I
I would
know.
have loved if they really gave more time to like Teresa and Thomas as like a relationship rather than like throwing Brenda in and making it like this weird like love triangle.
Yeah.
Um yeah, because also like I don't we talked about this in our last episode too that James Dashner doesn't really write female characters well, so they all are kind of
Yeah.
similar. So to basically have Brenda and Teresa just be very similar,
I
like
said that before
acting
too.
towards Thomas and
I said
talking. So it's not really much of a love triangle. It's just like Brenda's older and Teresa's younger. Like,
Hmm.
yeah.
yeah.
So Dr. Page is giving him tea to calm him down because she's like, we can't tell you everything now that you're also going into the maze. And the tea's making him feel a little tingly, a little dizzy. And Dr. Page is like, haha, little do you know, it was me who infected the Chancellor and his staff. And they wanted to stop after the maze trials, but I wouldn't let them. So Dr. Page is bad. Dr. Page is
Yeah.
pretty fucked up.
Sus. I was always sus. You know,
Yeah.
even when she gave him that tea, I was like, oh no, that tea is gonna put him to sleep.
Right.
Which
Yeah. And oh,
sheds a
sorry, go
lot of
ahead.
questions on Brenda because Brenda, the whole book was like, trust Ava Page.
Exactly. And then has to go get prepped for the swipe. So they're going to take his memories. This is also a little contradictory to the, like what is canon in the first book. Because like when Thomas does start getting his memories back, like he references like knowing his memories were going to get erased and like when he went into the maze and like knowing his memories were going to get erased. So
That's right.
again, a little bit of a plot hole issue here, but we're
Mm,
near the end of the book, so I guess we just got to accept it.
We have a montage of memories. He's a boy with his dad reading a book, some more memories walking with his mom, holding hands, playing tag, and he's losing all of these memories as the book ends on an epilogue from Ava Page, and she's thanking the staff for their work on inserting the elite people into the mazes. She says the final candidates are Teresa and Aris and praises their loyalties, which made me think, okay, they're snakes. They're turncoats.
yes.
Yeah, but then they like weren't. It was weird because then like because we know by the end of the other books they were like great, we're all escaping. So I don't know.
And that's all hiding,
But we also
hiding it
get
all,
like
hiding the secret, the
yeah,
motive.
yeah. I know because like Teresa
Yeah.
dies in the name of saving Thomas, and it's like when did this change then? If you were a snake the whole time.
Well, it's really confused because after this, Teresa sends out an email with an I'm happy Aris and I keep our memories to coordinate with you guys, aka Wicked, and I promise to
Mhm.
keep my role a secret, which is acting on Wicked's behalf. I will write Wicked is good on my arm to convince to the Gladers when I enter. And that made me really confused. So is
Yeah,
Teresa bad?
I know. It's like I think this was like this past like Kill Order and this is a prequel, were to give us some more like color into like why Teresa was so like wicked is good, wicked is good. But with the way the first three books played out, it's really hard to understand where Teresa stands, and this just makes us question it even more, because by the end of the third book, Teresa's like, yeah, like I've always been on your side, this is why I'm fighting with you.
Yeah.
And it's like this is it's just weird. It's just weird. Again, I have a lot of questions. I have a lot of processing going on.
Understandably. And it makes you
Yes.
wonder, like, has she maybe evolved over time to be like, oh, at first I was fighting for Wicked, but now I'm fighting for you guys, for you, Thomas, and for all of
Yeah.
the Gladers. I mean, maybe?
Yeah, and it's like
Maybe.
Ava Page was supposed to be the good character, because even Brenda, like the entire thing was you gotta trust Ava Page. Ava
I
Page
wasn't.
sends them to like the paradise at the end of book 3. So like again, what changes with Ava Page? Why did she have to be evil here? Because she was
I
supposed to
don't
be like the
know.
person who saved everybody at the end of the third book. Like,
I know.
It's,
I have no
it's
idea.
interesting. I almost feel like it's the series trying to take a crack at making complex characters who are neither
yeah.
good nor bad, or just in the middle, they're morally gray. However, I don't know if it
Yes.
really succeeds at that. It's trying to be morally gray, I feel like, but I don't know if it's fully successful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this series definitely struggles in a way that it's like it always makes a character like all one thing, and the thing like Thomas is always this golden boy that saves everybody, but like Thomas has like no flaws then, other
Yeah.
than the fact that like we think he's stupid, but I don't think that was supposed to be the flaw that he was given. Like we kind of try to make like I think, and then he just tries to like shift it all of a sudden with like no rhyme or reason. So
Mhm.
just yeah, a lot of things to think about and some inconsistencies with like both plot and just like character actions
A
based
lot
on
of
like the way
things.
that they've been introduced and written for us thus far.
Yes.
Yes. And it seems like that is where the book The Fever Code ends. We just got in quite a lot of thoughts on The Fever Code, but
Yeah.
I guess Arthur, what were your kind of wrap up feelings on the Maze Runner and this book in general?
On the Maze Runner series, so for
Mhm.
that first, I think I'm just like, this can't be fun. I feel like if you just click your brain off, if you just want to dive into
Mhm.
it, once you turn
For
your
sure.
brain on
Oh,
though,
absolutely.
that's when you run into problems with like the plot holes or like how the characters are written, and
Yeah.
just all of
Yeah.
those issues that you tend to run into if you are reading a YA dystopian series that is tropey, and then as the Fever Code specifically, again,
Mhm.
like I was constantly engaged with the book. It's not like I was ever bored, and I rated it 3 stars on Goodreads.
Mhm.
It's not, it's in the
Okay.
middle. Not the best book I've ever read, not the worst book I've ever read, but especially after you bring up the plot holes, Laura, it is also like, oof, damn, it really does. It really does cause some. It brings up some issues for the whole series to grapple with. But again, it's engaging,
Mhm.
and it's I was able to read it, and I enjoyed spending time with some of the characters, like Shuck. That was really good,
Mhm.
and Hard
Yeah.
Wrenching as well, devastating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
That's a really good analysis of it. Like this, if you turn your brain off and just go along for the ride, super fun. If you think too much, then you realize a lot of things.
I did enjoy getting to spend a little bit more time with these characters. And just like spending more time with the characters, you get to spend more time with us because we are starting our top 5 segment. And the top 5 for the Fever Code was, we thought it'd be kind of fun to see the top 5 crank pit activities. What are they doing down there?
Yeah, let's
It
give them
could be
some. Let's.
anything.
Hey, we know they're losing their minds. We can at least give them some things to do to pass the time.
Occupy themselves.
Yes, as they should. And I'm going to start this one off at number 5. I don't even know how to play this, but I think cranks could excel at this. I want to see them play bocce ball.
I agree. I also don't really understand what bocce ball is
Neither do
or how it's
I.
played, but I think the cranks would love it. I love that the three of us, no one knows what bocce ball is, but we're like, it ranks on our list for the top 5. That is
Something,
so funny.
something fun, whatever it is,
Coming
whatever it is.
in, yeah, right. Coming in at number 4, and this is per Arthur's suggestion.
I feel like Arthur should give this one since it was Arthur's.
Yeah, Arthur, did you have our top 5 written down?
If not, we could definitely say it.
Is it dancing? The dancing is that?
Yeah, it's the disco ball and the
Dancing, disco
dancing.
ball dancing. Yeah, just something to have like maybe a nightclub-esque environment, with just some dancing, some music to have some fun. Just move those bodies. That's
I
the
think it
number
would
3.
liven life up.
I think it would really just help them channel in all of the emotions that are just flowing through their brain and their bodies. Number 3, taking a page out of, say, like an outdoor restaurant, or just any sort of game room. A giant Jenga could be really fun. It's a great, just big physical activity to get to just really challenge their brains that are regressing so quickly.
Absolutely. Yes. And then what else would Giant Jenga not be complimented with? But some good old fashioned, our number 2, roller skating.
Yeah,
You ever
and
seen a crank in wheels? Crank
hey,
on wheels.
we saw what happened with the crank and the Transvice in book 4. We can only imagine what would happen with a crank on roller skates.
And maybe even
Exactly.
organizing their own roller derby league and inventing some of that theory, some of that wildness through physical means.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Only good things can come from this.
I think they would love roller derby.
And then coming in at number 1, we think that they should have maybe the old set of Chopped or another cooking show, so that they can not only cook for themselves, but they can also have their own cooking reality TV shows in the Crank Pits or the Crank Palaces or wherever the Cranks are gathering.
Yeah.
Whip up
Exactly.
some delicious dishes.
That's just self-explanatory.
I don't know if I can think of a name for it. I was just thinking of Cranktown, like Flavortown. I don't got
Yeah.
really anything important for the cooking reality show, but I would like to see it.
It's not our job to come up with a name for their cooking show. They're owning this,
Cooking cranks, crank cookers.
Oh, cooking with the Cranks. That's fun.
Cooking cranks is so good. CC, like when you CC someone on an email, and it's that.
Aw, that's so cute.
Fun.
Okay, and to wrap up this episode, we all have to talk about our canceled character. Let's
Okay.
give some nominees. I'm gonna nominate Doctor turned Chancellor Ava Page. I get that she was like a good guy in the first 3 books. I'm still processing a lot how to feel about her. But the fact that she was the one who put the order in for the virus doesn't sit well with me.
No. Honestly, I think I would also go with Ava Page. I was at first gonna say Randall because he was kind of mean, but I mean Ava Page
Yeah.
was the big turncoat. That was the whole device. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you, Arthur? Any thoughts on a canceled character for the week?
It's funny that you're all saying Ava Page because I was like, yeah, I'm gonna pick her too, and I was thinking anyone else,
Oh.
maybe who was like, bothersome, like maybe Randall or Dr. Levitt or anyone else, but I was like, no, it's like, Dr. Page was one who was, you know, pulling all the strings and just being like betraying the teenagers and the kids, and it's just like, oh no. In the end, she ends up sending Thomas into the maze and wiping away his memories. And I was always sus towards her. I said this earlier on.
Yeah.
Always sus towards her.
Yeah.
So that's my pick.
Wow, that was an easy agreement between all of us.
I love that.
Yes.
And
yeah.
it is definitely Ava Page as our canceled character.
Oh, 100%.
And that is going to be the end of the fever code for us. Thank you, Arthur, for joining us. If you want to let them know where they can find you on Twitter or where they can get Cents Critic at, yeah, you want to give your handles and whatnot.
Yes, definitely. And first, I want to thank you very much for letting me be on here again. It's like, really entertaining time. And listeners, if you want to find me on Cents Critic, you can, go check out the podcast, go check out the reviews and recaps of books, movies, and TV shows. You can find me on my podcast on Twitter and Instagram at 2_Cents Critic. You can follow my personal accounts on Twitter, Goodpods, Storygraph, Letterboxd, and TikTok at Arthur_Ant18. You can find me on Goodreads at Arthur Howell. You can email me at email2centscritic@yahoo.com. And my blog is at twocentscritic.com. And that's all of the 2 Cents Critic crap, and just, check it out if you want some
Hell
movie, books,
yeah.
and TV show content.
Love it.
Awesome. Yeah,
Nice.
thank you again, Arthur. Yeah, everybody check out 2 Cents Critic. It is so fun. And this is the part where Meggie and I wrap up the episode. So speaking of email, because I know that was one thing that Arthur listed off, you can email us too at MeggieandLaurapresent@gmail.com. Send us an email. We'd love it.
Yes, you can also find us on Twitter and TikTok at Yeah We Reddit, and on Instagram we are Meggie_and_Laura. And
Oh, sorry, Meggie, I
no, you
interrupted.
go.
Sorry,
You had something to say.
I was going to say, and we're going to be back next week with our final thoughts on everything we read this season. But if you have something to say before that, you should do that.
Yep, and that's going to be the end of our episode. Thank you for tuning in.
Yeah, thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.